Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how my reading has changed over the years. I'm doing the evolution of a reader tag. This tag was created by Jack at Spreadbookjoy. I was not tagged in it by anybody, so far as I know, but I thought it was a really interesting tag, so I figured I would do it. I saw it on Brian at Bookish's channel, and I thought his answers were really, really interesting, so I figured I would give it a go myself. There are only 5 questions, so I will dive straight in. Okay, so the first question is what you read. So how's your taste in books evolved? I'm not sure it has, is my answer, which is terrible, isn't it? I'm becoming all self-reflective now. I'm wondering if that's a bad thing. But I think I read the same kind of stuff as a 49-year-old as I read as a 14-year-old. And that was, when I feel my taste in books, really started to properly form. So that's when I started reading, a lot of horror, and I was already reading science fiction at that stage, but more science fiction and kind of thrillers and things like that. And I don't think my tastes have really changed that much. I still read authors now that I read back then, and I still read the kinds of books now that I read back then. I think where things have changed a bit perhaps is that I'm probably more willing to try more challenging books now than I would have been then. But even then, I was reading stuff that is considered literature, as well as the more popular fiction that tends to be my go-to. I'm not sure my tastes in terms of what I read have really changed that much. I've certainly gone through phases, so when I was that age I used to read tons of comics, like tons and tons of comics. I probably spent as much time reading comics as I did reading prose books, and certainly I don't read nearly as many comics now. Nearly as many comics now, but I do still read them. I've read Death Note in the last couple of weeks, which was a huge comic, so I definitely I'm still interested in comics, but I do prefer prose. Prose tends to be my go-to now, so maybe that's the one thing that has changed slightly over time. Second question is how you read. Has the format of your reading changed much? So I think probably in common with other people who've answered this question, yes, it has, because I used to read physical books, and now I read physical books and ebooks. I've never really got into audiobooks that much. But even when I was a teenager, you could get audiobooks. It's just you had to buy them on cassette tape, rather than just having them on your phone. Occasionally back then I would listen to audiobooks. I remember listening to a Wilbur Smith book with my dad when we were decorating the lounge when I was a teenager. And now occasionally I will listen to audiobooks, but very occasionally. I definitely prefer to actually read a book. But ebooks I think have been a wonderful revolution in reading, particularly because they make it so much easier to get hold of books, and so much easier to get access to books by independent authors who in the past just wouldn't have got published at all, and not because they're bad, but just because they don't fit into the market that the big publishers are trying to create. For me, ebook reading probably takes up maybe not quite 50% of my time nowadays, but not far off. And I do read, I've just talked about reading comics. I do read comics on my iPad and things like that sometimes as well. So it's not just, kind of Kindle books. Ebooks are hugely important to my reading nowadays. I don't think I could be without them. If I had to go back to only reading physical books, I think I would find that a struggle, largely because of the accessibility of books. There are so many books that I've read and enjoyed over the last few years that I just wouldn't have been able to get as physical books. Next question, how much you read. Do you read more, less than previously? When do you read, and has how often you read changed? So I definitely read more now than I used to. So when I was a teenager, and in my 20s and 30s, I guess in particular, I was much more into movies and also video games. So not so much as a teenager, but in my 20s and 30s, I was hugely into video games. And, you know, spent a lot of my time either playing video games or watching movies. I considered myself, you know, kind of a bit of a cinephile. I studied, you know, film and media at university. So I was really, really into movies and really enjoyed them. And nowadays I still enjoy movies, but I don't spend nearly as much time watching movies as I used to. I don't collect movies in the way that I used to. And I really don't play video games at all anymore, much to my son's annoyance. He really wants me to play some of the video games he likes. And I will do at some point. I give, you know, every so often I'll give one of them a try, but they just don't hold my attention in the same way that a book does. So yeah, books definitely have overtaken other forms of entertainment for me. And, you know, they are my primary source of entertainment nowadays. Next question then is, how has Booktube changed you as a reader? And I'm not sure it's really changed the kinds of books I read, but there are certainly books I've read that I wouldn't have heard of if I hadn't been on Booktube and watching other people's videos and getting recommendations from people in the comments on my videos. I get so many great recommendations from people, you know, in comments when I'm talking about a particular book. You know, I get loads of comments saying, if you like that, you'll love this. And I do try and, you know, try those books out. Obviously, there's a bit of a limit to how much I can read, but I have picked up a number of books because of recommendations that I've got in the comments and thoroughly enjoyed the majority of them. And also, now that my channel is a bit bigger, I'm getting more and more people sending me you know, books for review, so like advanced reader copies and things like that. So that was always something I had, because before doing Booktube I used to write blog posts for a couple of different websites. So I was getting advanced copies of books for that and was using NetGalley and things like that. But I've had even more since, you know, particularly in the last couple of months, as the channel has grown a bit. So yeah, definitely reading slightly different books. And I think the other thing that has changed, well, not slightly different books, sorry, books I wouldn't have even known about otherwise, but in, you know, in similar genres to the genres I already enjoyed. The other thing that has definitely changed, I've found, is that I'm reading more. So because of the schedule I've set myself, rightly or wrongly, on Booktube, of, you know, trying to put out a video every day, that means I'm reviewing, you know, in the way I'm doing my videos at the moment, I'm having to do two reviews a week. So that's, you know, definitely 2 books a week I'm reading, which adds up to over 100 a year, which isn't necessarily more than I was reading before, but it does mean I'm picking maybe slightly different books. So I'm making sure that in my TBR for the month, I always have books I know I can do a review of, because they, you know, they fit the style of the channel. They fit the kind of content I want to talk about on the channel. And I'm also getting involved in reading events, which wasn't really something I'd ever done before. I was kind of aware of reading events on Instagram and things like that, but I hadn't really got involved in them. And some of those have been fantastic. So, you know, Autumn and More, for instance, where I read, you know, a load of romance, which was not something, it was something I'd started getting into, but not read a huge amount of. So that was, you know, brilliant to go out of my comfort zone a little bit and read some completely different stuff. The final question then is to tag some people. So I'm going to tag a couple of channels who I don't think have done this one yet. So the first is Bad is Rad. So Bad is Rad had a channel with nearly 1,000 subscribers, and then some sort of YouTube mistake caused her channel to be erased, and she's had to start again from scratch. So there'll be a link to her channel in the description for the video. Do go and follow her again if you followed her before. So she is back and trying to build her channel up again. So a fantastic horror themed channel. And I'm also going to tag Shannon from Shannon's Bookish Musings, which is a not necessarily a horror themed channel, although she does talk about horror sometimes, but she covers a really wide range of books on the channel. Definitely worth checking out. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. So I thought I would be a little bit cheeky here and choose a book which is an adult book by a children's author, so kind of in that theme of evolution. So this is My Uncle Oswald by Roald Dahl. So I talked in a video a while ago about how highly I rate Roald Dahl's short stories for adults. This is one of his novels for adults, which I haven't got around to reading yet. So I definitely need to. But yes, you can tell from the cover it's not quite Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting. Do let me know in the comments how you feel you've evolved as a reader over the years, and whether Booktube has made a difference to the kind of books you read. And yeah, as always, hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.